Well, to be or not to be. Does that sound familiar? Well, I discovered I was an experiential being. Any of you are experiential here? If you haven't found that yet, maybe you should start reading the book again. But something existential exists within us, no? Ooh. Ooh. God Himself exists within us. And God is the I am, no? That's a concession they do. So if I want to be, if I want to become this I am, I need to do something about it. Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. So last year, a year ago, almost exactly, Gard, Agnes and I visit Gard in Las Vegas, the crazy city, a place where it's tough to be. And we decided, let's do a presentation, but it's not about information. It should be about transformation. We all feel that the Urantia book, or the teaching, or the incomparable teaching of the Urantia book, has transformed us. Did it transform you? A little bit? A lot? Is it still transforming you? Isn't that what the Spirit of Truth is supposed to do? Constantly renewing our mind. So when we were preparing a document, we say, it's difficult, because from now, when we wrote the book, the document, up to living what we live, even yet last night, everything changed. So we want to apologize for the organizer of this event, that we were not able to put a long text and you could translate it in many languages. And by the way, thank you for the presentator, the one that did a presentation this morning. But we felt we wanted a little bit different, spontaneous. And in a way, when we worship, there's something really spontaneous about it. When we pray, there's something really spontaneous about it. And when we serve, there's something spontaneous. You might have all kind of idea for service, but what God has prepared for you might be quite different. You know how to make God laugh, make plans. Because He has a different one for you. So, have you seen the movie Eat, Pray, and Love? Oh, that was good, eh? But we thought we would come with another version, Worship, Pray, and Love. So, we felt, when we were talking, that we were on the same, we appreciate the diversity. I'm Canadian, you know, Agnes is from Belgium, Gard is American, and we felt that even though we have diverse point of view, there was a lot of things that were similar. There was a unity between us. And we decided that we want to do that for you, to share with you what we felt. And what was amazing is that we had the idea, and when a man, a human being, us, humble, ascending mortal, I like that one. It keeps you humble. When an ascending mortal goes in partnership with the divine, great thing could happen. Yes? Could happen, and it happened. And it has happened for us Wednesday because of these people here that I'm going to introduce at the end. Well, in order for you not to get too lost, Agnes will read the introduction of our presentation that you can follow on the translation. But then what's going to happen, I don't know. But it's going to be good.
The seeds we sow are first cultivated within. All movement from our expanding souls is a movement from inside out. From this perspective, our life is truly an ascending spiral of continuous and eternal growth. Through the practice of worshipful meditation, we become more. We perceive more, we feel more and more the presence of our Father and our beloved thought adjuster. And in the process, our reality expands, we become more real. Through the practice of effective prayer, prayer of appreciation and gratitude, prayer of loving kindness, we spiritualize our thinking in order to serve better and realize more. Effective prayer is the spiritual bridge between being and doing, between our inner and outer life. In and through loving service, all these spiritual habits become practical daily realities, a process that makes us more and more useful to our siblings. And these three spiritual practices are concrete ways to maintain a living spiritual connection with true spiritual forces unfolding more and more naturally on the continuous bearing of spiritual fruit, yielding the ministry to one's follows of that which has been received from one's spiritual benefactors. It is about living transformative experiences and not much about information. Our spiritual quest is about becoming more in unifying in our experience, worship, our communion with our Father, effective prayer, our communication with the Son and service, our collaboration with the infinitive Spirit. Trinity was and is forever unified.
Maybe I should hold it. Well, in 2000 I met Michael, and as he said, we were filled with that divine enthusiasm. Are you filled with it at times? Yes? Are you filled with it now? Yeah. Right. Who was saying that yesterday? Alex, it's now or never. You should be filled with it now. It's time to recharge your spiritual batteries. Well, there's another way to recharge our spiritual batteries. You know, they can get depleted very quickly in this world of insanity and nonsense and of distraction and so many other things. And, you know, I think it's good to have a word that is appealing to us. So worship is good, but maybe it has some kind of connotation, religious connotation. And one day I met Gard in Oregon, and he said, "Guy, are we going for a divine appointment?" I say, "Wow, I like that. That's really good. A divine appointment. An appointment usually is with someone you love. Oh, I love God, but I don't have time to spend with God." Well, it's a nonsense. If I love my new friend Rachel or Liz, or it sounds like Mambo number 5, but I'm gonna spend time with each of them. Maybe I should stick with one, it's gonna be less complicated. So if I love someone, I should spend time with that person. And you know, we find in the Urantia book that God is a person. You know, for us, it might, we get used to it, but talk to some people and you will see, God is not a person. It's impossible. A person is a human being. No, God is a person. He has a personality. He has given me a personality. That's an amazing gift. Not only a personality, but a personality of deified reality. That means one day I will be like God. But in order to achieve that, it's going to take time. Step by step. You heard it this morning? Step by step. Ooh, baby. I'm going to get there. So, step by step. But I think step by step is day by day. And if you're able to, more than once a day. So we have adopted that divine daily appointment. Each morning, I spend time with God within me. And the way to God is the way within, the way to the inner life. One day I was on a road trip with a couple of friends, and then they say, one of them came to me very sincerely, said, Guy, we were entering the Zion Park. Have you ever been there? It's beautiful. And he said, Guy, where can I find God? I say, finally a good question. And I say, in stillness. Be still and know that I'm God. Still. You stop all the outside activity and you stand still. And then you will find God. And then another one. Silence. Oh, silence. I don't like silence. I like to hear music all the time. But God is in silence. That's the language of God. So see, two things that you have to tame. We don't like to be still. Our animal nature don't like to be still unless we sleep. And we don't like to be in silence. We're afraid of silence. We feel that silence is empty. But what does the Urantia book say? And it comes from a mighty messenger, a human being like us that have lived in a world of confusion. He said, emptiness has its virtue. It can be filled with experience. And the greatest experience that we can do is the experience of God. But in order to live that experience, you need to go within first. We need to develop that inner garden where we can cultivate the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, and you know all of them. We need to become good gardener of our inner life. And that's only in worship you can achieve that. So you might do everything you want, but if you don't worship, you should ask a question. Why I'm not worshiping? I don't have time. Rodin said at the beginning it can be difficult to worship because it's not habitual for us. And you know, I learned a lot of things from my Senegalese friend. Because for them, God is natural. They talk about God. Déjà? I'm done. How many? 8 minutes already? Really? Plus? Oh, okay. So I have to accelerate. Anyway, what I feel when I'm with them is that, wow, God is natural to them. Really. But God was not natural to me. So I think in order for God to be natural for us, we need to spend time with Him. And I think worship is amazing. And it's such a blessing. And as Gard said this morning, that's our biggest privilege from now to eternity. And yesterday, or in the last 2 days, I met a young man. And I asked him, how does he worship? And well, he told me something, but I'm going to ask him to tell me, to share with you. And one thing, God pushed back the limits. So if you think that our movement doesn't have young readers or youth, well, I changed my mind on that. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you're going to change your mind too. Sean?
There's a line in another book, also called A Big Book, but not quite as big of a big book as this big book. And it goes, we should keep our head in the clouds but our feet on the ground where our fellow travelers are. And so as far as worship goes, for me, that's pretty central, because if we get so wrapped up in kind of the loftiness of the ideals of what we should be doing, but then we're not actually doing anything, I feel like it kind of gets lost, you know. And the service that we get to offer to our fellows is kind of a worship and practice for me. And then also just the permission that this book, as well as others, have given me to be able to talk to God on a continuous basis throughout the day, where I don't have to, I mean, definitely pausing in the morning and the evening, but also throughout the day, but literally just being able to pause, like when, you know, when agitated or not, when, you know, just don't really know what to do, and ask God at that very moment, and being able to continuously do that throughout the day has just been awesome for me, and that, like, always something comes up, whether it's like an answer or a thing, you know, an event or whatever, and it's, you know, I have yet to be let down by reaching out and being open to hearing the response.
Well, thank you, and I think all of us do it differently, but hopefully all of you cultivate that inner life. That's where it all starts. And now we have someone who's going to talk to us about effective prayer. So, Agnès?
Well, first of all, what is praying? Prayer is communicating with God and keeping open the channel between the Son and us by opening the human end of the channel of the God-man communication. Mortals make immediately available the ever-flowing stream of divine ministry to the creatures of the world. Well, in two words, what happened to me in 1996, I woke up on the 1st of January and I said to myself, if I have to live one more year like I've just lived before, I prefer to die. And I didn't want to get up that day. Even though I had 3 children, my life was not making sense anymore. So I really asked God, and I was so sincere in asking it, that a few months later, I was in hospital between death and life, and suffering a lot. And again, I asked, a little bit like St. Thomas, I felt uncomfortable because I said, I'm going to do the same, but I have to do the same. So I'm going to do the same. And I said, please God, if you exist, I don't want to suffer anymore for 3 seconds. And I stopped suffering for 5 minutes. And I said, okay, you are the answer. So I'm going to continue to communicate with you. And how do I call my thought adjuster? Well, it's my GPS. Everybody has a GPS in the car. Most of the people have. And I have a GPS. And it is God's personal service for me. And so, well, when I need help, which means every day, I turn to that GPS and I ask intuition, direction. And as everyday life with my GPS, sometimes the GPS says, go straight ahead. And I say, no, I want to go on the right and see what's on the right. And I go on the right. And then it's always trying to redirect me on the, okay, it takes time, never mind. And God is the same. He never gets angry at me because I'm turning right instead of following his instructions. But he said, I'm going to meet her again somewhere else. And so I would like to invite here somebody that I met, a young lady that I met among other young people. and she is going to share what is prayer for her.
All right. So I brought my phone up here, not because I'm going to check a text message, because I might read something. And it was, thank you for the workshop we had earlier as well, because a lot of that was talked about in that circle, so I apologize for the repetition if you were there. English group 2. So I've had a lot of different conversations about prayer while being out here, and especially like during pre-conference and just sharing our ideas on how to communicate with God. Because for a while, I didn't really see it as communication. It was more of like especially before reading the book and before trying to like embark on a spiritual journey of any kind, prayer was like a Santa Claus kind of figure. And I think we kind of talk about that a lot. Even if I was praying for something, it wasn't like I was going to listen to the answer. And that was a huge turning point when reading like the pages on conditions for effective prayer. Just learning that like I have to get silent after I pray because there's always an answer. I used to think that like prayers had no answers. We're just like talking to nothing, even though I believed in God, but that's like its own kind of like agnosticism. But it's really, really important, like those pages in the book, the conditions of effective prayer, like really changed the way I communicate with God, like it is a conversation. And talking about how like I have to be, like I have an earnest desire to see God and do God's will before anything can happen for me. And how like the book talks about we have like plans and designs and like wants, like things I think I want for my life and all this stuff in my head about how things should be. And I have to try my hardest to get absolutely rid of that so I can hear the truth. And then even I was having a conversation with Jacob, if he's in here, I don't know. I think it was the first day we were here about how even when I'm praying for my fellows, I'm really praying for me. It's always very selfish. How if I am praying that like Lauren does well, I'm praying for me. I want her to do well so I'm comfortable. And what if she's not supposed to be comfortable? Like, what if that's not God's will right now? Like, we all are having the experience we need to have, but if I'm too busy in my own life, worried about this material world, and like, oh, I'm always going to be on to the next thing. I'm always looking for some other form of comfortable, and I'm not surrendering and not taking that risk of like giving everything over to God, like I'm just stuck here. Like, I'm praying to myself. I'm asking Liz what Liz should do about Liz. And then there's no communication with God. And remembering that God is in here, like there's like inside of me. It's like asking like, oh, where is God? Always right here. God is everything and God is inside. And that's a conversation I can have all the time, but I have to get quiet afterwards. I have to get quiet throughout the day so I can hear what he's trying to say to me. Otherwise, I'm literally walking through life asking the air about the air, and I'm not hearing anything. And then like the last condition of effective prayer, let me get that out really quick. I have a screenshot, one moment. And you must have faith, living faith. So if I'm standing up here talking about God and how I communicate with God and how we all need to grow closer to God, but I'm not praying and meditating and like having faith, like an actual faith, like an earnest desire to have my will be more aligned with God's. If like that surrender is always scary to me and I'm not actually taking it, I'm just talking about it, that's not a living faith. That's not faith at all. That's agnosticism. And I feel like we all kind of border on that a little bit too, whether it's like a career path or a relationship or a travel plan or whatever, like doing it or not doing it because you're afraid, like that's not faith. It's just not. And so like having a little bit of faith, like changes the way I pray. Knowing that God does listen too. Like there's no way he can't listen, but then I have to listen back. It's like a literal relationship. And yeah, it's just been a really great time out here getting to know everyone and hearing everyone else's experience, especially about prayer and service and worship, because I think it really does change the way we do things. We can always like change our devotions. So thank you for letting me even be up here.
Thank you, Agnès. Well, as Guy and Agnès have shared, it is we who are blessed to be with you. And I'd like to ask Rachel if you come up and share a few thoughts on service.
I have to start by saying that when I got on the plane in Chicago a week ago, I had absolutely no idea. I was coming here to learn, because you guys have answers, right? You guys have answers. I was coming here to soak up information, and I had no idea that I would have the honor of sharing my experience with how service has transformed my life. So I thank you for your attention and for what you guys have done for us this week. We had an incredible retreat, and the workshop that these three presented to us is going to be with me for a very long time. And I can only really add to what's already been said. I have a couple of my biggest pitfalls with service have been, there is a huge distinction for me between being a helper and being of service. And what that means is that the only serenity that I have ever experienced in my life comes from altruism. That's it. Serenity is directly proportionate to the service I'm doing for other people. And we all get caught up in like this idea that if you can just arrange your life just right, if I can just manage well and get all of my affairs in order, then I'll arrive one day at a place where I'm happy, right? That's what we're told. And my experience has been directly opposite to that. When I will abandon my need for security, my plans and designs, my life to God, and just embark on a service path for other people, I go to sleep at night like that. Instead of like the humdrum and the insanity. And when I say being of service rather than being a helper, my ego will try to attach to the service I'm doing in a lot of ways. And if I'm doing service from a place because I am obligated to do so, because I'm supposed to, because that's what people are telling me I'm supposed to do, I have very different results from that than I do from like a true desire to do good for another person. It also is important to me that in the beginning of this journey, I really wanted I wanted people to make sure that they knew I was being of service. You know, there's ego attached in that too, and like look at me being so humble and so of service. And I did that, and I found it was empty. It was absolutely empty for me. It gave me nothing on the inside to be seen or not to be seen doing service. And like my experience with this has been a long, windy road, but I've arrived at a place where God has transformed me through prayer and through worshipful meditation to the place where like nothing brings me more joy than behind closed doors being able to contribute to the value in another person's life, and whatever that way looks like, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical. We're not just talking about soup kitchens and feeding you. That is service in itself, but something as simple as if there's a friend or someone to me who needs me to be a space where they can have their own experience and be there for that, that is doing service to another human being. The greatest service I can do for anybody is point them to God. That's it. If I'm too busy being a helper, then I just want to make it better. And my job isn't to make it better. I can't make it better. My job is to direct other people to God and walk with them while they go. That is the most loving thing I have found that I can contribute to somebody is the ability to share the God in me with the God in them. Because like these guys have been telling us, knowledge doesn't do anything if there's no action to back it up. The reason I pray and meditate is so that I can be an effective servant. My primary purpose on this planet is to suit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And I can't do that by myself. No matter how many hours a day I pray in my room and meditate in my room, I cannot be of maximum service without others. And then we all get to experience this transformative power together. And it's a really, really cool thing. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful for these three, and I think that's all I have. So, thanks.
You are awesome. When my wife delivers children, she's an OBGYN, she always asks, and they normally say we can pray, and she shares the line from the book. You have just co-created with the Creator, a child without duplicate in infinity, irreplaceable in all eternity. And so you are. And so thank you so much. I don't know, Carmo, if you can put the slide up. But I get to share with you a few words about service. And we know in the book there's a lovely line that all true love is from, where was it from?
God.
Oh yes, God. In worship, we receive that love, and we receive that love so that we may what? Give that love in service. And in service, we then triangulate back to God as we pray to God for His will. And so this cycle of energy goes in the universe. So prayer, right, is the, if you will, the culmination of the experience of worship and service. And so I want you to do the following with me. I want you to take your right hand, put it up here. I want you to take your left hand, now bring it together. So your right hand is worship, your left hand is service, and you bring them together into what pose?
Prayer.
Prayer. So I have the privilege of being a teacher at a university, and most of my students are absolutely lost. They are seriously in trouble, as I once experienced myself. And one of my teachers, Thomas Berry, who is called a geologian, said there are only 3 principles which govern all of reality: physics, chemistry, biology, all of the sciences, philosophy, religion. And these are the 3 principles, and they actually absolutely correlate with the Urantia book. First, God is unity. And we experience that unity in worship. So for us to feel the family of God, we must worship. Peter said, neglect not your daily worship, your divine appointment. So that's the first principle, unity, and the practice is worship. The second principle is diversity, that we see this amazing array of diversity all around us. And anything that works against diversity works against the universe itself. And the expression or the practice associated with diversity is service. Service not just to humanity, but to creation itself. And so, unity and diversity, universe. And the third principle, it's a little bit of a tricky word, but it's the word autopoiesis, Thomas Berry says. Auto means self, poiesis, we get the word poetry, making, self-making. An acorn has no option but to become an oak tree. We, on the other hand, have free will. So we can decide to become something quite different. But we know from the book and from our experience, the ultimate expression of our gift is God's will. So it is prayer that leads us to the experience of God's will. And Michael, I'm asking for a little bit of mercy because I think we got started a little late. Is it okay if I just go for a couple more minutes? Carmo, is it okay? Yeah. So we're told that the roots of truth in your heart are nourished by the living waters of combined spiritual communion and social service. Spiritual communion, social service. It was after the third debate at our campus at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, that I went to class. I had made a horrible mistake. I told my class to meet, and the classes weren't meeting that night. And I said, we're going to do something different. And I asked my students, how many of you trust our political institutions? Anybody want to guess? How many of my students trust our political institutions?
0.
0. And I've asked these questions every class since, so hundreds of students now have been asked this question, 0, out of all of these classes. And then I said, how many of you trust our economic institutions? 0. And here's the kicker. I said, how many of you trust our religious institutions? 0. I thought I'd at least have a Mormon or an Orthodox Jew or somebody who said, yes, I trust my religious institution, but 0. Hundreds of students. So the Urantia book defines religion twice. Whenever it does it twice, this is something you should pay attention to. As faith, trust, and assurance. So we start with the self, and the practices I've now shared with you, they're very simple, they're very straightforward, but if you don't make the appointment, you won't experience the fruits of that. And out of that experience, we move into the family, which is our living laboratory of opportunity to be patient and kind, as Paul says. To learn the fruits of the Spirit within the context of family is the ultimate experience. And then we must, in some fashion, touch our community. And oftentimes in the Urantia community, we say, well, I'm doing work for the Urantia Revelation. That's good. There is a sacred obligation to the brotherhood of believers. But there's also a sacred obligation to the planet and to our local communities. So let's act locally, think globally. And then to again think about what's going on within the larger context. So within the context of family life, these are my 2 daughters. You'll see one is transgender, my second daughter Julia, and then 2 sisters. There's an amazing opportunity. When my daughter transgendered 2 years ago, she was a little uncertain about how mom and dad would feel about it. And I said, well, the contract was when you were born, unconditional love. The contract's still unconditional love. And she's absolutely my teacher. And then there is, in some fashion, touching our community. How do you touch the life of your community? What kind of service do you engage in within the context of your community? And in our community, we break it down into 5 sectors: education, economy and jobs, environment, arts and culture, health, and human services. And how do we affect those areas where we spread a beneficial influence into our community? So I've adopted some projects, which Gandhi talks about his life being an experiment in truth. So these are my experiments. The first is a fellowship. So I've gathered over the years 150 now nonprofit leaders from each of those sectors to really engage and develop circles of trust, to create a depth of relationship so that they can not only work with one another, but they can work together to create collaborative solutions for our community, which in Las Vegas, we have our issues like all of your communities. The second, well, let me just share, the acronym for our fellowship is TRUST. T, teamwork, R, respect for every person, U, unity of vision, urgency of mission, S, excellent in service, and T, transparency, trust. And so the first project is Camp Anytown, which we've been doing for 30 years. And I shared with some of you what we do there. We bring in about 60 or 70 youth from Las Vegas. We teach them about prejudice, bias, and bigotry. Prejudice, everybody understand the word prejudice? Right? Which basically, the bottom line filter which keeps us from the family of God is prejudice. And the only way we overcome prejudice is to go within with that vertical dimension of worship, communion, and to engage in a quality of service. So these kids come in and they don't think they have any prejudice, but within a day we display and they understand they do have prejudice. And after 3 days of exercises we put them through, they say, I'm done with that. And their lives are literally transformed. And we've been doing this now for 30 years, and it's extraordinary. Our mayor said, you did that in 3 days? And the answer is yes. And so in this experience of Camp Anytown, these kids come in, and they are all in pain. They're all in a deep place of grief. But by the end of it, they realize that they are family, they're part of the family of God, and the Urantia book is being revealed not necessarily with the words, the Urantia book. The other project my wife and I got started is a project called Volunteers in Medicine. We have 450 volunteers in our community, and in the United States of America, unlike some of your countries, we do not have universal health care. In our state alone, nearly 300,000 people have no access to health care, and they are, with the age of 30, 35, tagged a natural death with diabetes or heart disease. And my wife and I said, no, that's not a natural death. That could be prevented. And so we believe that healthcare is a right and that every person should have access to healthcare. So we created Volunteers in Medicine of Southern Nevada to create that context. So we do dental work, mental health, and medical. Last year we saw over 8,000 people, gave away $3.1 million in free medicine, over $1 million in free diagnostics, and 39,000 hours of volunteer work. This is Carol, who had a stroke. She lost her job. She had no insurance. She was left to die. And we said, come on in. By the way, I'm only qualified to be a greeter. So Rachel, if you come into Volunteers in Medicine, I greet you. So pleased you're here. So pleased, I'm sorry you're sick, but we're going to take care of you. And we do. This is Svetlana, who was from Russia. She was an immigrant with her daughter Maria. She had a tumor in her ovaries, and it was growing like, if you saw the movie Alien, it was growing at an exponential rate. And we immediately recognized she needed help. The hospital opened up their OR free of charge. The anesthesiologist came in free of charge. The surgeons came in free of charge. And Svetlana and Maria are a family. And we've worked with our community, so the city of Las Vegas has adopted compassion as its North Star. And I'm part of a group called Charter for Compassion, which you'll see a little bit in a second. And this is 450 cities around the world, and you could make your city, Tallinn, or wherever you live, a city of compassion. It's very simple. If you have any questions about it, see me. But we did this, so we're now known as Compassionate Las Vegas. We're doing great work around homelessness and education. And in the state, we've adopted a license plate. And I don't know, can you see, Lauren, who's helping who up the mountain? Who's got the ponytail?
The one who's helping, yeah.
The girl is helping the guy up the mountain, and it's Live the Golden Rule. And by the way, in the United States, this is a wonderful way of attracting funds. We will be making about $200,000 a year just by putting out this message of Live the Golden Rule. So here are the steps that you can take, and we'll close this up. First, you can start a circle of trust. Trust. Faith, trust, and assurance. Most people don't trust. In America, right, 1 out of 4 have nobody they can turn to for trust. So I encourage you to develop a circle of trust, which means people you can gather with periodically. It's not a church, it's not this or that. It's a place where you can go and you can open up your heart to the depths. And you can be there for one another. Second, you could start a cooperation circle, which is an interfaith phenomenon. And there are over 1,100 in the world today. It is burgeoning. And again, sometimes, as we heard this morning, the church is not working so well for us, but bring together some people who have some faith and have a conversation, URI.org, or become a Compassionate City, charterforcompassion.org, or plant a garden. Where's Lucas? Lucas, raise your hand. Lucas is my gardener from Germany. Lucas is doing great work. We have in our town the largest school-based program for gardens, over 150 gardens. And we're teaching kids through curriculum K through 5 how to be a gardener. And Voltaire, the great Frenchman, George, where's my Frenchman, George? Dupont, where are you? Voltaire said, right, if you want to change the world, plant a garden. George has a beautiful garden in his backyard. So I want to thank you for your attention, for our time here. Again, as Rilke said, I give my life, right, to all the expanding circles. I may not ever complete the last one, but I give myself to it. Now I would like to ask all the young adults to come up. And again, these are extraordinary people. They have taught Guy and Agnes and I so much. And Anna, you're the coordinator. Would you like to say just a brief word? Say just a brief word of your experience.
I'm always unprepared when I get on stage like this, but I'll try to speak from my heart. I got to know all these beautiful souls, and I met only today this new beautiful soul coming to the conference in Estonia. And we had some wonderful days together, 4 days pre-conference at the Old Town Hostel. And we had a wonderful time together, connecting with each other, sharing, exchange thoughts. A beautiful workshop which enriched our being together. Is there anything else I have to say or want to say? Yes, I want to thank you all for putting so much trust on us, and to open up your hearts to invite you and together with us in Estonia. So thank you very much. Without knowing us, just be and stick with us for so much time. Thank you very much.